Hi, my name's Nia and I'm from London and I run a CBD startup called Eugenio. And Planet Kambo have agreed to have me on the channel today to talk about my Kambo experience, which was something that I did for the first time with Planet Kambo. So I did Kambo at the beginning of 2019 and I'd never heard about it before. I had no idea that anything like this even existed. But John, the founder of Planet Kambo, sent me an email and he detailed the process and what it was and asked whether I'd be interested in perhaps trying 3 ceremonies. So when I first heard that it was essentially frog poison and that I would be applying frog poison to superficial burns in my skin, I thought, this guy must be crazy. There's no way that I'm doing this. What is he thinking? But I am a scientist by background, and when I remained open-minded and I went away and I researched a bit more about the process and the science behind it and what the benefits are meant to be, the more fascinated I became and the more I thought actually there might be something here and this could be something that's worth trying and worth booking in and going ahead with. So I scheduled in 3 sessions for the new year. I thought new year, new me. Quite literally, because I also had a plant medicine ceremony coming up, so the timing was a bit of a synchronicity because it was my first ever plant medicine ceremony, and from what I'd been reading online, it was good to do 3 sessions before your plant medicine sitting. So apparently the reason for this is that it's a great way to cleanse and purge the body before you go and do something like ayahuasca. And it's also a good way to get used to the purging process, which is something that also happens in plant medicine. So I thought, perhaps this is meant to be, for better or for worse, as it usually is. And yes, the first thing I did was I went and I looked up what Kambo actually was, and it comes from the venomous secretion of the giant leaf monkey frog, or the monkey toad, in South America. So in terms of its history, it has quite an interesting history in that it's believed that there was a legendary page known as Kampu, and that he was a shaman in the Amazonian basin who was looking for a way to heal his sickly tribe. And there might be something to the story because I don't know how they would have discovered this by accident, but apparently under the guidance of the visionary brew ayahuasca, he asked the spirits of the forest for a way to heal his clan, who were being left weak and unable to eat or hunt as a result of this disease that was sweeping through them and killing them off. And apparently the spirits of the forest showed him the giant leaf monkey frog as well as how to extract and apply the secretions in order to make them better. And this was first brought to the West by missionaries and anthropologists working in the area. And it's also come to the attention of pharmaceutical companies before as well, but they've so far been unable to copy and to patent these essential biopeptides. So this actually still remains one of the only ways to get the benefits. It's going direct to the source and going to Mother Nature. And in terms of the biopeptides themselves, they are interesting in that they work naturally with the body. So we have receptors in our body that are designed to interact with these compounds. You've got things like phyllomedicine. So this regulates dopamine and serotonin in the brain. You've also got things like sauvagine, which are meant to be good for depression, anxiety, and addiction. And you also have compounds like adrenoregulin, which is a powerful antibiotic. And there are so many of these that work with the body to boost your health. And it's believed that it can help you physically, mentally, but also spiritually as well. So in terms of its indigenous use, it's believed that there is something called Panama, which is apparently equivalent to negative energy or bad energy. And the spiritual context of this medicine is that the purging process helps you to release that, and that this bad Panama energy can cause things like depression and low mood and fatigue. So my motivations for trying this were mainly health related. I felt like I wanted to give my immune system a boost, and I wanted to try something different, and it seemed as though this was relatively safe so long as you didn't have the contraindications, which are things like pregnancy and heart conditions and Addison's. So that is definitely something that I would recommend going away and researching before you do this process. If you have any pre-existing health conditions, whether or not any medication that you're on can interact with it. So for example, if you're receiving chemotherapy or cancer treatment, it's not recommended that you do this. And you should always go ahead and make sure that you're fit and well for the best effects, I think, just in case. But it seemed relatively safe. From what I'd read online, there were very few people that had negative reactions, and certainly in terms of my experience with the 3 ceremonies that I did, I didn't have any negative side effects to talk about. Obviously, the ceremony itself isn't exactly comfortable, so it's known as ordeal medicine because the purging process itself is a little bit of an ordeal, but it is temporary and it doesn't last very long. So in summary, there are 3 main parts to the ceremony. So you've got reset, restore and revive. So reset is the ceremony itself. It's where you're giving your immune system a boost, you're resetting everything, and you're going through this purging process. And then in the restore process, which is afterwards, you get something known as the Kambo afterglow. This is where you feel really strong. You can run faster in the gym, you can hit all your personal bests, you feel like you're in a really good mood. I just remember feeling invincible and in such high spirits, and it was one of the reasons why I couldn't wait to do my second sitting in a week's time, even though I knew that the purging was quite uncomfortable. I just thought no pain, no gain, or no purge, no surge, as they say in this space. And then the revive is about the long-term benefits, so not falling ill and really just feeling like you're in peak condition. So for my 3 ceremonies personally, I did the first one in my house. John came over and we did a one-to-one with one of my friends, and I did the same thing for the second ceremony, except that in the first one I used a feminine medicine, and in the second one I used a masculine secretion. And then for the third ceremony, I thought I'd try something a bit different, and I went for the group setting. So I'll talk a bit about each of those ceremonies, as well as each of the different medicines and how it all differed, so that you can go away and decide on what you think might be best for you. So in the first ceremony, John travelled to my house, and we made sure that the environment was nice, because set and setting, as with any of these medicines, is really important. So we had incense, we had candles, we had a very gentle music in the background, and we made sure that we had buckets and that we'd drunk a lot of water. So the day or the evening before the ceremony, you're meant to do a water cleanse, and drink a few litres of water, and try not to eat too much in the hours leading up to the ceremony, because the purging process requires a lot of vomiting, so the less that's in there, the better. So I'd made sure I'd done my water cleanse, and the first thing that John did was he really made sure that the context was historical and spiritual and respected those origins, which I really appreciated, because I do think that's very important. And in the secular West, you know, we place so much emphasis on this reductionist lens of just what we can see, observe and measure, and just what's rational. And I think that what embracing this more irrational context does is it adds in the other half of the picture, which is all about ritual, ceremony, stimulating the body's self-healing mechanisms, consciousness, and some of the other things that we can't yet explain as well as we'd like to. So the first thing John did was he used his training, and he did that. He said a prayer, and he also did a rapé ceremony with us. So rapé is another plant medicine, and it's sacred tobacco essentially, but it's different from the kind of tobacco that you just roll into a joint and smoke. It's much more pure, and it's made by grinding the tobacco leaves with other herbs. And the application process isn't nice. It's essentially put into a sort of horn, which they sell on the Planet Kambo website, or a bamboo pipe, and you put a bit of the rapé into the horn. One end goes into your nose, the other end is with the applicator. You can also self-applicate, but with Planet Kambo, John did the application for everyone, and he blows really, really hard until all of the tobacco shoots up your nose and into your head. And I mean, the purpose of this energetically is, they say, to improve focus, to sort of open up the ceremony energetically and clear all the sinuses. It certainly did that. It feels like, I would say it feels almost like a slightly burning sensation, and it does make your eyes water, but it is a good way to get into that headspace of sort of bearing with the process in order to reap the rewards at the end, I guess. And you do feel that clarity and sort of grounded and ready to engage with this medicine afterwards. So we did the rapé ceremony, and then we made sure we were comfortable, because the Kambo purging process can last up to an hour. It depends on how you apply it though. So you can choose. You can either go all in and have all the secretions applied at once, and then in that case it lasts about 15 or 20 minutes. Or you can space it out and you can put on the application slowly, and the process is less aggressive perhaps, but it is longer, so it will take up to an hour. So the first time I did it, I thought probably better to go slow and gentle, because I don't really know what to expect. So I applied it all slowly, and for me it lasted perhaps maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But having then done that once, I would recommend just going all in and just getting it over with, because I think it is easier to do a shorter, more aggressive ceremony than to have it drag out. So I did the shorter one the second time and the third time, but the longer one the first time. And the way it works is John will make some superficial burns on the skin. So it sounds scary, but it's not as bad as it sounds. It was just made using an incense stick, so nothing major. It's not like they're branding you like cattle. It was very, very light, and you can't even really see mine anymore, but I did it on my forearm. You can do it anywhere you like on the body, and people like to make lots of different patterns. I just made a very simple cross. You can't really see it because there's nothing really there anymore, but just a very simple cross pattern, burning some very light superficial circles into the surface of the skin so it doesn't go any deeper. And this is where the secretions are applied. So the reason for this is that if you get these secretions anywhere near your eyes or your mucous membranes, or if you swallow it, it could be fatal. It should only ever be applied by an expert to the surface of the skin. And these come from the back of the giant leaf monkey frog. It's extracted in an ethical way, so they don't kill or harm the frogs. They pick them up, or they gently tie them down, and they scrape it off their back onto these sticks, which are then dried and come over to the UK for application. And John at Planet Kambo always makes sure that they come from an ethical source, and and that demand isn't sort of draining the population. So he applied some of those secretions to the superficial burns, and this is where it can get direct access to the lymphatic system. And this is why you get all those immune boosting benefits, because it works directly with the body in that way. And as I mentioned, the first one that I did was a female medicine, so from the female toad, which it said is a little bit more complex and emotional, whereas the masculine medicine, which I did the second sitting, is much more direct and much more physical. In terms of which one I prefer, I probably would say the masculine one, which was physical, was a lot easier to get through, but then that might also be because it was my second ceremony, so I had experience by then and I knew what to expect. Whereas I remember the first time around, it felt quite hard. I really welled up. I felt every emotion come to the surface, and I just remember thinking, I'm so tired of this. But I knew that it was temporary, and I knew that it wasn't going to last. And it can be a little bit sort of nerve-wracking the first time around because you don't know what to expect. But I think that it's, in a way, it's good mental mindset training, because you've got to tell yourself that it's going to be okay, you can handle this, loads of people have done this, and people do it all the time, and you're going to feel great afterwards, and you'll get through this. And you know, as with the rapé, it's great to get into that headspace, and then once you do, the whole thing just becomes so much easier. So it is just getting used to, as well, the frog face that happens at the beginning. So as soon as it was administered, I felt my whole skin start to flush and go red. I could feel warmth and tingling creeping up my neck and into my face. My friend who I was doing it with, I looked over at them, they'd gone bright red. Everything swells up, your lips swell up. I mean, you certainly don't want to be going on a date afterwards. It all subsides and comes down immediately after the ceremony, but I do think it's just good to be gentle with yourself for at least, you know, 1 or 2 days afterwards. I pretty much went straight back into work and went into my normal routine. It doesn't really matter, but you will be a little bit swollen, and your lips puff up and you essentially look like a frog. So I wouldn't do the ceremony with a date either. It wasn't particularly attractive and it wasn't particularly comfortable, but you can still breathe, you're not choking, you're fine. It's just an uncomfortable process. And I had my bucket in front of me, and John was great. He was a very calming, comforting presence. You really feel like you're in safe hands with the Planet Kambo team. So after that, I started vomiting into the bucket. So it's not really vomit in that you're not puking up sort of the rainbow chunks that you're used to seeing. It's more just a pure water, partly because you haven't really been eating anything, but also partly because of the way the medicine works. And what they say is that you want to vomit until you start to see yellow bile, which is meant to be a good indicator of health and the detoxification process working and getting this Panama dense energy out of the body. So I found that quite tough, in that puking up water and froth was fine, but really getting to the point of getting that bile out was quite difficult. Towards the end I started to see a little bit more, but it did feel quite physically tiring. You can be a little bit tired afterwards, before the afterglow kicks in. But we got there in the end. The music really helped, doing it with someone else really helped, and I did just feel like I'd had a whole load of trapped emotions sort of come to the surface and finally be released, which is probably not something we pay enough attention to in the West. We're very good at taking care of our physical health, we're good at going to the gym, running, lifting weights, but we probably don't do so much for our emotional and mental health. You know, seeing a therapist regularly is not as common as going to the gym every week, and doing practices which benefit our emotions, like meditation, Kambo, tapping, all of these things that are coming to the fore now, probably aren't as much a part of our regular routine as they should be. So I did feel like there was an emotional cleansing there that carried over into the second ceremony as well, where I did the masculine secretion, and that was much more blunt and direct. And I also had the direct application process as well, where I just went ahead and did it all at once. It was much easier, it was much quicker, cleaner, faster. I knew what to expect this time. You do have that dread before you go into a ceremony where you think, oh no, is this really what I want to be doing on a Sunday? But when you remind yourself of how good you felt afterwards, because that afterglow, I was in such high spirits. I hadn't felt that good in a long time. I went to the gym and I could run faster. I felt really strong, really fit. So thinking about that rather than the process itself was what got me into the second ceremony. And then after the second one, I did my last one in the group sitting. So with the group sitting, I think the nice thing about that was just that the space was held by a few people, not just one. So you had lots of helpers on hand. They could give everyone sort of one-to-one attention. And you really felt safe and supported, and it was nice to have that camaraderie and that community feeling. And the other thing that was interesting was it was just sort of an interesting process to notice how different everybody's purging experience is. So for some people, they're super calm and collected and it comes out very easily, and for other people it's traumatic and it's aggressive and they're being very dramatic. And I mean, I think you could probably liken it to people's different birthing experiences with women. So some women it just sort of slips out, and with other women it's a real process. And I think the same could be said here. Everybody's just very different, but I do think it's a lot about that intention that you come into it with. So if you come in with the intention that this is going to be something that's going to be crazy and horrible and you're going to suffer, then the process usually is like that, because you're sitting there squealing and panicking. Whereas if you come into it with the intention of, okay, I can handle this and I will get through this and it doesn't need to be a shit show, then you can just kind of glide through. It won't necessarily be comfortable, but I would say it would be a lot easier. So that was the benefit of doing it in a group, and by then it was the third time, so I was ready, I knew what to expect, and it was just really nice afterwards to be able to lie down in the space, smell the incense, listen to music. They had food and sandwiches on hand, which was amazing, and the people were so lovely. And you always end up connecting with other people that have done plant medicines and use this kind of medicine. You've all got similar stories, and it's just such a nice way to do it. So I think if I was going to do it again, rather than the one-to-one, I actually prefer the group community setting. And you know, everybody's frog faces are kind of funny as well. It's, you know, a shared sort of trauma is, you know, a bonding experience for life. So yeah, it was lovely, and I would definitely do it again, especially because not only do you get the short-term health benefits, but just the long-term benefits in times like this. I think it's something that I would probably start doing regularly, as I would, you know, get a flu vaccine. It's probably, in my eyes, potentially the natural equivalent, and the process is actually enjoyable in a way. There are enjoyable elements to it, so it's something that I would look forward to. In terms of any negative effects, I can't really think of any. I definitely didn't have any side effects. I do know people that, one person that I know had a skin rash afterwards, but it could have been related to something else. It just sort of happened to come up at around the same time. I think the only thing to notice is, as with anything, you know, maybe just moderation. I don't think it is something that needs to be done sort of, you know, too much. And in fact, I think they say in the research that you definitely shouldn't be doing it frequently and intensively. But I was happy to do it maybe, like a couple of times a year as a boost, and because I hate being sick. So that's probably the only other negative, is that you won't get any more sick days off work, because you will just be fit and strong for the rest of the year after this. So the other thing is, it's something that's quite difficult to explain to friends and family. So when I told my parents that I was doing a Kambo ceremony and they started asking questions about it, it didn't really go down very well. But I did manage to convince a couple of friends to do it with me, or to go in and book their own ceremonies down the line. And a few just did sort of one and didn't want to do it anymore, but others are still doing it today. So it's definitely, I think if you haven't tried it before, it's worth doing and seeing what it can do for you, and you won't know until you've tried it. So it's definitely something that I recommend. And I can't speak of Planet Kambo highly enough. I just think the whole team was so knowledgeable. They were so passionate about what they're doing. They were so experienced. They really made you feel safe, which is something that I think that's incredibly important. And it's important to have guides who have experience of doing it themselves, and everybody there on the team had done this themselves and engaged with this personally. So they really do walk the walk and practice what they preach. And in summary, it's nature's vaccine is something that you can't really find elsewhere. I don't think that this really compares to anything else out there. And so long as it continues to be done sustainably and ethically and within the context that it's meant for, I think it's something that will certainly stick around and only get more popular, and for good reason. So thank you for listening to my experience. Make sure you subscribe to the Planet Kambo YouTube channel, and if you have any questions, you can email info@planetkambo.co.uk. Thank you.